Welcome to Blend's Localization Leaders series, where we interview industry leaders who are paving the way for advances in localization through their work. In this episode, we're joined by Dean Seeley, Google's Localization Strategy Lead. I'm so excited to have Dean Seeley here with us today, Google's Localization Strategy Lead. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to hear more about your background, your career path, and how you ended up where you are as the Loc Strategy Lead at Google.
No, I'd love to. So thanks for having me. So I'm originally from the UK, and I guess I went to university and I graduated with a degree in languages and international studies. And for me, I knew I wanted a career that involved kind of language and culture. And I started my kind of career journey in an consumer insights kind of agency, and I was localizing kind of client research materials and also kind of consulting with them around kind of the languages that they should consider and giving them cultural advice and consultancy. And that's kind of how I kind of got my feet wet in the localization kind of industry. And from there, I shifted into kind of the tech industry and worked at kind of Amazon and Netflix, and really was involved in both vendor management and localization program management, and really developed my passion for localization. And in 2020, I kind of got my role here at Google and have been
Amazing.
here kind of just over 3 years now.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really interesting journey, and I guess you had it from the start. Honestly, everyone in the localization industry tends to have that passion, and it's
They do.
really amazing. Um, awesome. So now that we're caught up to present day, what role would you say localization plays at Google, and how's your team department structured? Everyone does it a little differently.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I'd say here at Google, we are very much structured around the products that we support. And so we are very much a product aligned team. So, kind of in my case, the area of focus that I very much am aligned to is YouTube. And so we really
Amazing.
do, no, thank you. So, we really do kind of align ourselves around YouTube's kind of go-to-market strategy, how we can help them unlock new opportunities around the world, help them understand the value add that localization can bring for them, any barriers or obstacles that they may be encountering, and really help new stakeholders understand what localization is, the journey that we can help them kind of go along, and really just help them understand and champion the value add that localization provides. I think we often hear, the people who don't know what localization is think it's just translation. And so a
Right.
lot of what we do is help kind of champion that value add of, localization provides that cultural competency. We can help them understand the languages that they should consider when they're kind of thinking about a new market to enter,
Right.
and really providing that kind of upstream consultancy and partnership, really just being that thought partner for all of our kind of stakeholders around the world. And I know you asked like how is our team structured? So
Yeah.
I'd say like really typically like most localization teams, I think we're structured in a comparable way. We have a language strategy team, localization program managers, innovations, and then we have sibling teams as well in vendor management, engineering, who we really closely partner with as well. And I think in typical ways we're dispersed around the world as well.
That's very cool. What you're doing is very important. And
It's constantly an evolving
mm,
world, I think, with the
yeah,
way creators, if I think, are evolving and growing, and I think also the world of subtitling and dubbing. It's it's constantly growing, and I think that's why our industry is always innovating, and I think that's something that's really
Yeah,
exciting about our world.
absolutely. Like your team, are you guys all based on the West Coast together in California, or are you sort of dotted all over the place?
Yeah. So the localization program managers are all here in the West Coast. And then our language team are dispersed around the world. And then
Yeah.
I'd say like the rest of the team are kind of dispersed kind of throughout North America.
What are your tips, especially as someone that's been in the localization industry and understands cultural differences? What are your tips for optimizing global team communication that can be
Yeah,
a bit tricky sometimes?
that's a good question. I think flexibility and adaptability,
Mhm.
that's key. I think knowing that we do have this kind of follow the sun model, taking that kind of collaborative mindset, being available, off hours is always
Right.
important. I think that helps kind of solidify the relationships you have with your colleagues and with your stakeholders. Having meetings early in the day, late in the day, checking your emails at off hours, that makes sure that you have that kind of fluidity of communications with people, makes sure that your projects continue to flow well. If your partner agencies need an answer, you can kind of quickly, provide it to them. And then, checking your instant messages. I think that really helps kind of making sure that things continue to flow, that there aren't kind of barriers to those communications, and it makes sure that you kind of continue to kind of make sure those relationships stay solid.
Absolutely. Do you ever find that there's like cultural sort of differences, like if you're working with a really diverse team, or in terms of like
There,
learning how you communicate, how you work?
Yeah, I think there are some markets where, there are obstacles or laws that preclude people from working at off hours, and I think
Mm,
that's something we have to build in. We know that like in
right.
certain countries, like in France, they can't check their emails at certain times of the day, and I think
Wow.
that's
I never knew
legally
that.
required. And I think that was a law that was passed recently, and I think in
Mm,
in Nordic countries, in the summertime, the availability of resources, people
mm.
take their summers off, and so we have to bear that in mind, and I think that's something to keep top of mind as you work with a global team. I think that's
Right.
something we always keep top of mind.
Yeah, and I guess that is just being flexible and adaptable, like you said.
Yeah.
So, um, awesome. And so, speaking of global challenges, are there any markets that you found particularly challenging to break into?
Yes, I think when we were, I think throughout my career and most recently expanding into Africa, I think that
Mm,
the parts that we had to really pay close sensitivity to were the socio-political issues and sensitivities around language, particularly in countries that had perhaps, a dozen or more official
right,
languages and dialects. I think that we had to really partner closely with our local stakeholders and our legal team to make sure that we were not potentially causing any socio-political issues by the languages that we were considering. And then
right,
also partnering closely with the insights team to make sure that any languages that were being considered were the correct languages for the market and for the products that our stakeholders were considering, knowing that it was a kind of a new market and markets that our stakeholders were considering, conducting a lot of pre-work with insights, with data, was extremely important to make sure that we were considering the right languages for the right territories, and we were partnering
right.
with local experts rather than just deciding outside was extremely important. So we made sure to reach out to in-country experts to make sure that we could provide and glean from them their expertise rather than making the decisions, from North
Right.
America.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, no one knows it better than a local. So,
Yes, very
yeah,
much so.
yeah, very interesting. Great. So, with all your experience in the industry, what piece of advice would you leave for anyone that wants to enter the localization field or someone who's maybe new?
Yeah. I'd say consider some of the industry events. There are lots of networking events, free events, network. We're a
Yeah,
bunch of friendly people. Most of us will always be happy to network, to have a conversation. Think about the different roles that are available within the industry. There are,
yeah,
diverse set of roles, whether it's a program manager or a language manager or a vendor manager or an internationalization engineer. Think
mhm,
about, the different roles that are available and what type of role really resonates. Ask questions. That's really important and will help people to understand, what it is that we do. The industry continues to evolve. There are so many innovations that are taking place, and I'd say like that no day is the same within localization. And I think that
mhm.
people considering joining would have a really fun career in localization.
Yes, definitely keeps things interesting.
Yeah, very much so.
Awesome. Well said. That's great advice. So before we wrap things up, I just want to do a quick round of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Um, so you can just give me kind of quick answers, but no pressure. So
Okay.
what's your favorite language?
Well, Hebrew. I think from some of my
Um,
from my background, I've really had a passion for Hebrew.
Makes sense. Yeah, awesome. And your favorite localization tool?
I have enjoyed working with Smartling.
Awesome. Best place you've traveled to?
Myanmar. I think for me, because my
Wow.
grandmother was born there, I really enjoyed visiting
Wow.
there.
Very cool. Best localization advice you've received.
Never assume and ask as many questions as possible.
What's the most successful market you've invested in?
Brazil. I think that's
Brazil.
been one of the most
Mhm.
successful markets.
What's your localization nightmare?
You know what? Again, it was Hebrew. I think a few years ago we had localized some initial content and we had conducted tests and it was functioning correctly. And then before it had been launched live, it appeared upside down and left to right
Oh
instead
my
of right
God.
to left and correctly. Yeah,
That sounds like a nightmare.
yeah,
Yeah, those are tricky, all the right to left languages.
yeah.
Who is your localization role model?
One of my former colleagues, who I worked with for a few years, his name is Martino Prada Diaz. He's a great role model.
Awesome. And lastly, which brand is your localization crush? This can be any
Also,
any
also
company.
Spotify. I really
Oh,
enjoy how they localize. I would say like
yeah,
that they're really, really innovative and good at how they approach
yeah,
localization.
I agree. Amazing. So thank you so much for joining us on Blend's Localization Leaders series. It's been really great to hear your perspective, and I'm sure all our localization, our whole community will appreciate hearing everything you've shared. So thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was great to meet you.